I have seen and killed real evil. I'm not talking about people. Well, I've killed plenty of them too. But no man compares to real evil. No man is capable of the same atrocities and chaos that real evil inflicts. I hunted giants during my first deployment to Afghanistan, and they are the epitome of evil. I'm a U.S. Army Ranger. I've been serving in BAT for 12 years and I've seen and killed the scariest shit imaginable. I haven't told anyone for fear of what would happen to my family and me. I lay awake most nights, wishing I could tell my wife what I've encountered, my mind and soul breaking from the weight I have to carry. I relive the horrors every night when I go to sleep. I've kept it all to myself until I found NoSleep. I recognize many of the stories posted by my brothers in the Spec Ops and military communities, and realized I finally had an outlet. I've checked in on some of the posters to confirm they're still breathing. I guess the government assumes that NoSleep is fake, so they don't monitor it. What I'm about to share with you is all real. You deserve to know what lies in the shadows. You deserve to know what they're hiding from you. And you deserve to know about the men and women that have sacrificed their lives to keep the forces of evil at bay. Skip the next few paragraphs if you are knowledgeable of the Spec Ops community. It's important that you have a basic understanding before I get to the crazy shit. I promise you that the stories that follow will be worth the wait. Army Rangers are a Tier 2 Spec Ops unit, along with Green Berets, SF, SEALs, Marine Force Recon, and MARSOC. Tier 1 consists of CAG, Delta Force, DevGru, SEAL Team 6, and numerous groups that I won't speak about. There's value in being unknown to the world. We are often joined by Tier 1 groups from around the world, which are usually the SAS, Brits, Aussies, and Kiwis, and Joint Task Force 2, Canadians. Tier 2 consists of the top 1% of the military. Tier 1 generally only recruits the best from Tier 2. We all train for years for selection, qualification schools, we all possess top-secret security clearances, or higher, we're all very good at killing, and we all will forfeit our freedom or lives, and possibly those of our families, if we share what we've done. Our government utilizes Spec Ops units because we work in secret, we are the best, we're well-funded, and we can deploy anywhere in the world without congressional approval, declaration of war. You'd be shocked by how many countries, and which countries, that we're currently serving in. Our track record is impeccable but usually closed to the public. I'm 34, a major, and have been serving in BAT, Ranger Battalion 1 ST/2ND/3RD, for the past 12 years. I'm from Kansas City and a MizzouRanger graduate. I'm currently attending a military school, NSOC, at Fort Leavenworth while I work on my PhD from Kansas State, and await my next deployment to some hellhole. The good news is that I have plenty of time to share my experiences before I head back out. My first encounter with real evil happened during my first deployment to Afghanistan. It was 2009, I remember checking the computers in Kuwait while awaiting a C-130 to take me to Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. I was excited the Chiefs had just signed Matt Cassel, thinking we'd be headed to the Super Bowl soon. Talk about naive. Anything to get my mind off of what awaited me. Death? Paralysis? Loss of limbs? I was 24, just a year out of college, and didn't even have a serious girlfriend. I had a lot to live for. I pushed it out of my mind, leaning on the fact that I'd be leading the baddest motherfuckers on the planet. My Rangers would get it done and I'd make my Baton Rangers proud. I flew into Bagram at 2,200 with a couple dozen other soldiers, wearing our INSATIABLEBLDCK, bulletproof vests, and ACHs, Kevlar helmets. The C-130 was dark, only the dim green lights illuminating the inside. Those around me glowed an alien green. The pilot gave us a warning to strap in as he began his descent, circling over the airfield and shooting flares to ensure no RPGs could hit us on the way down. Some fobbit whimpered and cried in the corner, while an NCO, making eye contact with me, yelled at the soldier to stop being a bitch, as he rolled his eyes with a small grin. The ramp lowered, slamming hard on the cement runway with a loud, metallic crack. I grabbed my gear and head out in the dark. A huge staff sergeant, SSG, yelled, "LT, get your shit and follow me." SSG Vasquez, 6'5" and built like a brick shithouse, shaved head, looking like the Hispanic version of The Rock. He led me to the hooch in the spec-obfuscated community on base. It was a storage container, which had 3 sleeping quarters divided by plywood. He told me to throw my gear on and head to the TOC, Tactical Operations Center. The commander had a mission for me. I stood in the TOC, in full gear, M4 hanging from my sling and Glock in a leg holster, looking at the dozens of TV screens and soldiers monitoring radios. The room was full of chatter. Too much chatter. Something big was going on. My commander, Lieutenant Colonel, LTC, Williams introduced himself, telling me I was in the big leagues now, shut the fuck up, and do exactly what Captain, CPT, Stone said. He then ushered me into a side room. I looked around and realized this wasn't going to be a normal mission. SSG Vasquez sat at a table with 8 others, their sleeves bare, no Ranger scrolls. I realized it was an ODA, 8-man team of Green Berets. My commander started his brief. Team 329, Team #S/names changed to protect identities, went missing approximately 4 hours ago in a desolate portion of the Alisay Mountains. Their last transmission came in broken. They were escorting a CIA operative to a cave high in the mountains. We haven't been told anything else. We're sending in Team 357 for search and rescue. LT, you and Vasquez are tagging along. Your platoon is on mission for another few days, so you're going to get some experience, learning from CPT Stone and his team. The S2, intel officer, stepped in and provided as much detail as he could for the mission, while my commander pulled me out of the room. LT, we don't know what the fuck is going on. The CIA are being shitbags as usual. They've left the teams and us in the dark. I want you and Vasquez to gather as much intel as possible while you're there. These fuckers are getting our guys killed and we don't know what for. I met CPT Stone and his team at their vehicles, 3 HMMWVs that had been stripped down. They basically looked like dune buggies with miniguns mounted on top. CPT Stone looked me in the eyes. He had a steely resolve, but there was worry behind his eyes. He raised his hand above his head and said, LT, aim high. I responded, Roger sir, headshots, gathering that he meant the enemy had body armor on. He looked at me again, fiercely serious, and fully extended his arm above his head. No, aim high. I nodded and we all loaded into the vehicles. Is he saying they'll hit us from the top of the cave? I remember thinking. I pushed it from my mind as we took off. We left Bagram, still pitch black, wearing NVGs as we rode through the hot, desert night. I was constantly scanning the perimeter, waiting to be ambushed on the roads. I looked back at the huge, bearded team guys. They were all looking straight ahead. They all seemed to know something that I didn't. They had zero concern for the road and seemed to be a million miles away in their minds. It was as if the real threat far exceeded what we'd see from the Hodges en route. We hit the Alisay Mountains a couple hours later, pulling into a small combat outpost, COP, and dismounting. Ammo, grenades, water, and NVGs is all that CPT Stone said. I grabbed my assault pack as one of the team guys tossed me a few grenades and extra mags. We stepped off from the COP, moving up the mountain in a wedge formation. I remember thinking we were invincible, as I looked at these huge warriors, carrying M4s, SCARs, M2 sniper rifles, and 203 grenade launchers. These guys had probably taken down entire Al-Qaeda units by themselves. They had the look. The one you earn from taking the lives of other men. I felt like I was superhuman. Little did I know what awaited us. We came upon the cave just as the sun was cresting the mountain. The sky was blood red, as the darkness faded into oblivion. The cave looked like the mouth of a giant serpent. The opening was on the other side of a sheer ledge that stood 10 to 15 feet high. As we approached, CPT Stone said, eyes up, keep your distance. As we got within 100 meters of the cave, I saw something shiny on the ground. I signaled for the squad to halt and called CPT Stone over. It was a radio. The mic had been ripped off and the radio had a massive dent. Dried, black blood caked the side of it. Chunks of skin and tissue littered the area. CPT Stone said, "Shit, James." As his face turned to anger. He stood up as one of the team guys pulled out some climbing gear. He fastened it and we all climbed the ropes as silently as we could. I was last to climb, cresting the ledge and seeing the squad and the prone, pointing their weapons at the cave opening. As soon as I was up, the squad stood and started to move slowly toward the cave. One of the team guys took point and took a few steps toward the cave. I was overcome with the worst smell imaginable. Like sulfur, shit, and rotten milk. I began to get an intense feeling of despair and hopelessness. It wasn't the adrenaline rush and heightened senses of a normal engagement. It felt evil. Just as he put his hand up to motion for us to stop, I heard the deepest, loudest roar emanate from the cave. It sounded like a cross between a man yelling and the roar of a lion, but blended in an impossible manner. Before we knew it, something huge came charging out of the cave and impaled E with a massive spear, lifting him 15 feet off of the ground. I looked in amazement at what looked like a huge man. It was absolutely massive, standing 13 to 14 feet tall, its shoulders as wide as I am tall. It had long, red hair and a shaggy, red beard. It had a loincloth on and leather sacks on its feet. We were all momentarily frozen. There was an absolute sense of pure, unbridled evil that emanated from this thing. Finally, CPT Stone yelled, "Headshots!" We all unleashed a barrage of rounds into its head and face. 9 soldiers, all emptying 2 to 3 magazines worth of ammo into the beast. It dropped T, who was still skewered on the spear, and began to charge me, the ground shaking with every step. It looked at me with such cruelty and disdain, open mouth revealing 2 rows of giant teeth. I felt like an ant that was about to be stomped on by a child. It yelled something, in another language, that I didn't understand, its voice splitting my eardrums. As it reached out its massive hand to grab me, it finally fell, riddled with bullets, its head and face caved in. CPT Stone empties another magazine of 7.62 into the giant's head, before going to check on E's body. It took 3 of us to lift the spear and another 2 to pull E's body off of the spear shaft, which makes a sucking noise as we pull him off. The spear had ripped out his entire chest cavity. His ribs were splintered and sticking straight out, like crooked, jagged teeth. All of his internal organs lay in a pile on the desert floor. The 5 of us covered in his warm, sticky blood. CPT Jones called in the sit rep and requested transport. We all sat down for what seemed like an eternity of silence. Normally, after a mission, we joke around and tell the most inappropriate stories. It's tradition and makes the horror of war feel a little more acceptable. Today was different. Every eye was glazed over. Everyone sat, facing away from the giant. We had felt real evil. This thing was not a man. Being in its presence brought on a feeling of hopelessness that I can't begin to describe. It was like all of the joy, hope, and good had been sucked out of the world, replaced by despair and agony. We finally stood up and examined the beast. It had 6 fingers on each hand. Its hands were large enough to wrap around my torso. Its mouth revealed 2 rows of teeth, with each tooth being the length of my finger. The hair on its head and beard was an unnatural shade of red. I wrapped my hands around one of its fingers in an attempt to lift its arm. I couldn't even get its hand off of the ground. The spear, still dripping with blood, weighed as much as the logs we use in training, that require 6 men to lift above our heads. We stepped into the cave, seeing hundreds of human bones. Chunks of skin, tissue, and military uniforms littered the pile. In the corner were hundreds of weapons. Modern guns, like M4s and FALs, rusted out AK-47s, and ancient, rotting swords, spears, and shields. It's like it was keeping trophies. An unmarked Chinook showed up 15 minutes later. A bunch of spooks, CIA ops, walked out. One said, "Grab the Neff." The team sergeant yelled, "Fucking clowns, thanks for the intel." The agents never made eye contact. They unloaded a forklift and cargo-net, wrapping up the beast, and loading him into the Chinook. CPT Stone motioned for me to come over. I asked if he was doing his closure report, a brief officers have to fill out to summarize battles. He said no, wait for it. Shortly after, one of the agents walked over and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a pre-filled closure report, detailing how we had been ambushed by Al-Qaeda. He had been killed before we scared them off. He said, "Sign here." CPT Stone signed and motioned for me to do the same. With a threatening look, the agent said, "You can never speak of this." He turned to walk away and I asked what's enough. He paused momentarily, then walked off. When we returned to Bagram, we did a full debrief. Some spook sat in the corner the entire time to ensure we didn't speak about the giant. After the brief, my commander told me to shower and meet him at the smoke pit in 20 minutes. Ditch your electronics. LTC Williams handed me a cigar as I approached the smoke pit. He asked me what I had actually seen on mission and then explained to me that 6 other teams had encountered these giants. Most were less lucky than we were. He informed me that he was trying to figure out what the hell they were. And he did eventually. But, that's a story for another day. My first engagement with a giant set off a chain of events that brought me to the truth of those evil beings, and many others. After the mission was over, I was approached by one of the team guys. He removed his hat to reveal a Key Paw underneath. "Sir, do you want to know what that thing said to you when it charged?" he asked. I nodded without hesitation. It said, "Son of Yeshua, I will eat your soul." He then looked me in the eye and said, "We've killed dozens of these things. We're figuring out what they are, and it's not good. Head out with us on mission tomorrow and I'll fill you in." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have any questions, advice, or suggestions, please leave them down in the comment section. Stay safe out there, Paranormal Archives.